So why do we fall for stories that are just too good to be true, especially when it comes to our money? It turns out our brains are kind of wired with this powerful glitch, and it can be incredibly dangerous when the stakes get high. Today, we're going to dive into these powerful and, let's be honest, often dangerous, appealing fictions we tell ourselves, especially when our financial future is on the line.
I want to start with this quote. It's from a Yemeni father named Ali Hajaji, and it is just heartbreaking. It perfectly captures this raw human truth. When you're desperate, you become vulnerable. This one devastating sentence really sets the stage for everything we're about to unpack.
And the story behind that quote, it's just tragic. He had no money for a doctor, so Hajaji turned to a folk remedy. He was just clinging to the only hope he could find. See, he wasn't a bad father. He was a desperate one. He was pushed into a corner where any story, any possibility of a cure felt like the only way out.
In Hajaji's story, as extreme as it sounds, is not some isolated incident. Not at all. It's actually part of a much larger historical pattern. Whenever the stakes are incredibly high and our sense of control is just gone, our standards for what we're willing to believe can completely plummet.
This is nothing new. We see this pattern all throughout history. You look back at the Great Plague of London. People were turning to prophecies and quack doctors selling these never-failing preservatives. For centuries, patients actually let doctors do things like bloodletting, which we now know only made things worse. And today? Well, we see a very similar pattern in the financial markets, where people chase these unbelievable promises from supposed gurus. The formula is always the same: high stakes plus low control. That equals a willingness to believe just about anything.
So this brings us to the core idea of this whole explainer, a phenomenon that we can call appealing fictions, right? These are the stories we buy into not because there are facts to back them up, but because the alternative, the idea that there's no easy solution, is just too painful to even think about. They're stories born from hope and pure desperation.
Okay, so how does this ancient psychological glitch actually show up in the modern world of finance? How does it affect your money, your portfolio, and your future?
Well, let's start with a really, really big number: $5 trillion. That's about how much money is invested in active mutual funds just in the US. Now, the appealing fiction here is that some brilliant fund manager can pick all the right stocks and beat the market, making you rich. It's a fantastic story, right? And we pay trillions for it.
But here's the harsh reality. Over a recent 10-year period, 85% of those active funds failed to beat their own benchmark. And this isn't some fluke. That number has been pretty consistent for generations. We pour trillions of dollars into a story that fails the vast, vast majority of the time. So why? Well, because we desperately want to believe we can pick a winner. And this kind of fiction is literally everywhere in finance. We're always chasing the next Warren Buffett. Super sophisticated investors gave Bernie Madoff billions because his story of steady, high returns was just too good not to be true. Heck, even the Federal Reserve tends to predict slow-ish growth because forecasting an actual recession is just too painful and professionally messy for them to really consider.
So, if the evidence is so clear, why do we keep falling for these stories? Well, the answer lies in our brain's own deceptive logic. We have this deep, deep need to make the world make sense, even when we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle.
To get what I mean, just think of a 1-year-old kid. Her world is super simple. If dad isn't playing with her, the story in her head is, dad doesn't want to play. She can't possibly comprehend the reality of things like budgets or work deadlines or economic policy. She builds this crystal clear story from the tiny fraction of the world she can actually see. And here's the thing, we all do this. We all create these neat, tidy stories based on our own limited information. The Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman explained this perfectly. See, after something happens, we can always look back and build a story that makes it all seem inevitable. This hindsight, it gives us this powerful illusion that the world is orderly and predictable, even when it's really just chaotic and random.
And that illusion of predictability, it feeds into an even more powerful psychological need, our desire for control. We desperately, desperately want to believe that we are the captains of our own ship, that our actions directly lead to our outcomes.
This is exactly why the demand for stock market forecasts is permanently high, even though we know that forecasters are notoriously wrong. As the psychologist Philip Tetlock says, we crave that sense of order. And so these authoritative-sounding experts, they offer us a story that satisfies this deep need for control. And that feeling of being in control is often way more persuasive than the messy, uncomfortable reality of uncertainty.
You can see this illusion of control play out perfectly with entrepreneurs. When you ask them what determines their success, they typically say their own actions account for at least 80% of the outcome. Now, they're surely wrong about that. Market changes and competitors play a huge role, but they focus on what they know and what they can control, their own plans. And this creates a really powerful and often dangerous illusion.
Okay, so we're wired to believe fictions, especially when we feel desperate or out of control. So what do? How do we fight back? How do we protect ourselves from our own psychology? Well, there is a practical antidote.
And it's called room for error. Now, this isn't just about saving more money. It's a whole mindset. It's the buffer you build between the story you want to believe and the reality you absolutely need to be able to survive.
Think of it this way. The story you want to be true is, my stock picks are going to be genius. Room for error is planning so that you'll be okay, even if you're completely wrong. You want to believe the economy will grow forever. Room for error is making sure your finances can actually withstand a nasty recession. It's your defense against wishful thinking.
And this brings us right back to where we started. This gap, this room for error, is your ultimate protection. It's what gives you the flexibility, the independence, to avoid getting backed into a corner where, just like Ali Hajaji, you feel like you have no choice but to believe in a desperate and damaging fiction.
Because at the end of the day, it's so important to remember this. The single most powerful force shaping our financial lives isn't some external thing. It's not interest rates or inflation. It's the internal stories, the fictions, or the truths that we choose to believe.
So I'll just leave you with this. Take an honest look at your own financial beliefs, your plans, and ask yourself one simple question. What appealing fiction are you telling yourself right now?